Hi, I'm Neil Snyder. Thanks for joining me for another Snyder Talk video commentary. Today I want to talk to you about an issue that is on the minds of a lot of people these days, and that's the formation of what people commonly refer to as one world government. Just listening to people talk, you get the idea that suddenly, out of the blue, this thing will just spring up. Well, that's not how things typically happen in the world. And what I want to suggest to you is that we are in the process now of creating this one world government, and I'll use a specific example to make my case. Today is the 30th of March 2011, and if you read American Thinker, go to the internet, it's americanthinker.com, you'll see an article there by me, and it's titled Obama's Slippery Slope. Tomorrow in Snyder Talk, in SnyderTalk.com, there will be a Snyder Talk editorial by that same title. It's also by me, of course. It's the same article. When you publish something in American Thinker, you have to wait a day before you can publish it in another source, and that's what I've done. But I want to read that editorial to you. And again, you can find this editorial today in American Thinker. And when I finish reading it to you, I'll explain the significance of the points I'm making. And again, the title is Obama's Slippery Slope. U.S. involvement in the Kosovo War was based on a principle first espoused by Prime Minister Tony Blair of Britain. We have a responsibility to act. President Bill Clinton wasn't convinced at first, but after Blair's unyielding campaign to sell his idea, Clinton went along. It was the world's first humanitarian war, and to this day, the guiding principle of Western leaders boils down to a single, undefined phrase: we have a responsibility to act. President Obama had nothing to do with the principle's creation, but he used it Monday night in a speech at the National Defense University in Washington to explain why the U.S. went to war with Libya. His talk was aimed as much at the peoples of the world as it was at the American people, and he left no doubt in anyone's mind that nations of the world have to have a responsibility to act to defend suffering humans wherever they may be. Like socialism, in theory it sounds wonderful, the right thing to do. But in practice, it's full of holes because it is just an open-ended, nebulous concept. The problem with the principle breaks down when you look at the first word, we. Who is we? Is it the UN? Is it NATO? Is it the Quartet? No one has yet clarified who we are. But if the we have a responsibility to act principle is going to be our guiding global principle, someone will have to. In due course, you can bet that someone will. The we have a responsibility to act principle becomes even more problematic when the word responsibility is introduced. What is responsibility? Is it a duty, a task, or a job? If it is, then who gave it to we? The UN? In Libya's case, the answer is yes, but in other cases, the answer is no. Take Iraq, for example. The U.S. and its allies were going to take action in Iraq. That was clear from the beginning, but the UN didn't go along. In the end, a coalition of the willing simply assumed responsibility, invaded Iraq, deposed Saddam Hussein, and replaced his dictatorial Ba'athist regime with a democratic government. We're still enmeshed in that struggle, but the we have a responsibility to act principle is no clearer now than it was in the 1990s when it was first introduced. The final problem with the we have a responsibility to act principle is in the definition of the phrase to act. Broadly defined, to act can mean anything, from invasion to no-fly zones to embargoes of various sorts, to anything the we decides is their responsibility. People who have dedicated their professional lives to law enforcement realize how thorny this arrangement is because it violates every principle of jurisprudence that we have come to accept and respect. It's the global equivalent of vigilante justice, and it can't and won't survive. To become a legitimate guiding principle, the we have a responsibility to act principle must clearly define we, responsibility, and to act. Absent those definitions, the we have a responsibility to act principle leads to chaos and potential repression on a global scale by a coalition of the willing, or the UN, or any other group that sees as its duty the responsibility to take any action it chooses to bring about any outcome it desires. Will the we be the UN? Maybe, but it's doubtful given the UN's current configuration, its spotty record, and its propensity for manipulation by individuals and groups with dark agendas. Will it be NATO or a similar group? Not likely, because NATO and groups like it are simply alliances of nations, subgroups of the nations of the world. In the end, defining we will challenge the very concept of sovereign nation, because if the we has a responsibility to act, then nations by definition can't be sovereign. We are in the process of defining what has come to be known as one world government. In due course, the questions I've posed will have to be answered, and they will be answered. When they're answered, we will have a one world government with laws, regulations, taxing authority, and enforcement powers, everything a global government will need to operate. I'm not telling you this because I think it's the right thing to do. I'm bringing it up because it's inevitable, and it's taking place right now. We're not waiting for it to happen. And again, you can find that published in AmericanThinker.com today, which is March 30th, 2011. Now, here's the point. This one world government concept is coming into being. We have world leaders, including many in the United States, who are moving us as rapidly in that direction as they can. Government leaders and business leaders. And it'll happen. And why will it happen? Because the problems that face the world today are no longer domestic problems. They are global problems. And you can't solve global problems with domestic laws. The global institutions we have in place are not effective any longer. We have groups of nations forming ad hoc formations of groups to deal with specific problems. That is not a workable solution. Everybody knows that. It looks like vigilante justice. It is vigilante justice. There's no real enforcement power in the world today. There's no way to pay for enforcement power. Right now, the United States military is the enforcer. The United States, the citizens of the United States are paying to police the world with our tax dollars. That's no longer affordable given the terrible deficit and debt situation the United States faces. The bottom line is that we are on the verge of the formation of the of the global governing structure that everybody fears will come to pass. Now, as I said in the last paragraph of that editorial, this is not what I think ought to happen, but it's what will happen. And if you're smart, you'll pay attention, because we're going to have to deal with what is, not what we wish was. And that's where we stand today. If you're looking for a one world government, keep your eyes open, because you're witnessing it coming into being even as I speak. Thank you for joining me for Snyder Talk video commentary. And if you follow Snyder Talk every day, nothing that I'm talking about now is going to surprise you, because if you read it, you're seeing these things on a daily basis as they occur. Thank you again. I look forward to another Snyder Talk video commentary. We'll see you later.